Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon or good morning in the case of your time zone. Welcome to the Expedient Software webinar and today's topic, which is the mysterious case of the self-locking Excel RFP. My name is Diane Loudenbach. I am the VP of Services for Expedient Software. I'm joined here today by my colleagues on our panel, Jason Anderson, who's our VP of Sales, Sharon Coddington, our VP of Marketing, and of course our speaker, who is Melissa Mabon, founder and software architect of Expedient Software. So first, a little bit about us. Expedient's RFP and proposal software helps RFP and proposal teams and sales teams create beautiful proposals, responses to RFPs, and other selling documents quickly and easily. The implementation is completely developed and contained within Microsoft Office. No outside software required, and is developed by the creators of Pragmatech's RFP machine and Proposal Smart Docs, for those of you that have had the pleasure to work with those in the past. Now, before I turn the presentation over to Melissa, we do have a couple of reminders, housekeeping items here. First of all, please note as we go through the presentation that the RFP Inspector tool is available to you upon request. Simply go to expedientsoftware.com and click on the Free Tools button in the upper navigation bar to receive your copy today. And second, throughout the presentation, we definitely welcome your questions. Want to let you know we are going to save them until after we complete the demo of the Inspector tool itself and before we move on to the other components of the demo. You'll want to use, this is the Zoom interface, you'll want to use the Q&A button. If you hover somewhere around your screen, probably toward the upper left-hand corner, depending on your interface, potentially down toward the bottom of your screen, there should be a button called Q&A. And that's where you can go ahead and log questions for us. We're going to hold them again until later in the presentation, answer as many of them as we can get to, and then follow up with any that we can't meet during our limited time frame today. So please go ahead and use that. There's another button you may see for raise hands. That is not one that we will be monitoring, so please use the Q&A for today to just assist us and make sure that we're getting everything incorporated. So with that, let me just take a few minutes to tell you about today's presenter. Melissa, as I mentioned, is the founder and chief architect of Expedient Software, which is a successor company to Pragmatech Software, which she also co-founded in 1994. And during her tenure there, Pragmatech grew to be the leading proposal automation provider, twice receiving Inc. 500 recognition. Some of her other awards include New Hampshire Entrepreneur of the Year, New Hampshire Remarkable Woman. She holds 2 master's degrees, both from Columbia University. And this point, I believe, I've gone through the necessary housekeeping. Pause for a quick second to my panel friends to make sure that I haven't missed anything critical. All right, and we'll go ahead and turn over that presentation to Melissa Mabon. Melissa, thanks again for being with us today, and I think we are ready to begin.
Great, thank you, Diane. So I'm Melissa Mabon. I'm going to talk a little bit about Excel and Word. The reason for the product we're going to show to you today is a working group that we put together at Expedient about 2 years ago. And this working group was put together to gather requirements for a product to help people respond to RFPs in Excel. And we did actually complete that commercial product, but along the way, we learned quite a bit about Excel RFPs and how to use Word and Excel. And we actually developed some functionality for the commercial product that we felt was very useful, that we decided to make that widely available, and that's the tool that we're going to be offering to you. So we're actually going to divide our presentation into 2 parts. We're going to start with looking directly at Excel and Word and show you some of the cool tips that we've learned, as well as how to avoid that self-locking cell problem. That is the title of our presentation. We're going to look at bullets and images and all kinds of things that are usually pretty big challenges for people working in Excel. And we're also going to look at data restrictions, data validation, also a big challenge for Excel RFPs. And when we look at that, we're actually going to look at the product that we're going to make available to you. So this is a product we call the Excel Inspector. This lets us examine the data validation that's on an Excel RFP, even if that workbook is protected or locked down. So really useful. You should see now a worksheet and also a Word document. Here we are. So what we're going to do is look at some of the challenges in copying and pasting from Word content, that's formatted content, into an Excel workbook. So here is my first Excel RFP. I've got 3 questions, and that's because I'm looking at 3 different topics, not because I think you get RFPs that only have 3 questions. So let's have a look. The first topic I want to look at is the title from our presentation, which is the challenge of self-locking cells. So if you've never seen this happen, that a cell automatically locks itself, you're very lucky, but the chances are that problem is lurking in your Excel RFPs. So it's a good thing to know what causes that. Let's look at first at what locking and unlocking means. So we have a worksheet here. You can see things are grayed out at the top. That's because my worksheet's been protected. This is probably one of the most common ways that Excel RFPs are delivered. The sheet is actually protected, and there are some cells that are locked that you cannot edit, and some cells that are unlocked which you can edit. That's very typical. So a cell is locked and you know it's locked. For instance, all my question cells are locked. I know it is because if I try to type something in there, I'm going to get an error message. It says it's on a protected sheet, right? Can't do anything here. This cell is unlocked. I can type in here because it's unlocked. Let's have a look behind the scenes at what that means. I'm going to unprotect the worksheet. Now, I'm going to do that by clicking unprotect. Chances are, if you have a protected worksheet, you're not able to unprotect it because it'll have a password on it, but of course we're going to let us do that. So let's have a look. See, this is a locked cell. We can see how that's done. If I look under format, under cells, I can see the lock cell toggle is turned on. That cell is locked. I come over to this cell, that's my answer cell, and I look at this and it's not checked on, so it's unlocked. Really standard. Generally speaking, when you make a new workbook and make a new worksheet, all the cells are typically locked by default. Doesn't matter if a cell is locked or unlocked. If your sheet isn't protected, you'll never know the difference, but when it's protected, that's when that difference comes into play. So it's very common. You would have all your cells locked. You would find the answer cells that you want your responder to use. You would set those to unlocked and then protect the sheet. So let's go back and protect it. By the way, there's lots of settings you can use when you protect a sheet. It's another thing that you may not know. So if your issuer has protected the sheet and they've password protected it, you only know that it's protected. You won't know necessarily which of these things have been checked. So something to keep in mind. So we're going to allow objects, that's pictures, because we want to bring in some pictures later, but not too much. So let's go ahead and protect that up. I'm going to bring in, copy and paste the answer to the very first question. I'm just going to copy this. Again, this is just a Word document. I'm just going to copy this line. I'm just going to do a Control-C to my clipboard, click over to my answers, and I'm just going to paste it in. That's just a Control-V. And there it is. And it looks pretty good. No problem here. So you see I even have my little blue italics, and it looks very nice. That's because I pasted that on top of the cell and it brought all my formatting in. I'm very happy. So let me go on to the next one. Then I realize, oh, you know what? That's the wrong answer. It's not 2000. We're up to 2200. Let me just go back in that cell. Just going to make that change. And there you see it's locked it. So that's become locked. I cannot get in that cell. Remember, it should let me edit. That's an unlocked cell. So what happened here? Looks like a bug, right, in Excel. Actually, this is not considered a bug in Excel. This is considered a feature. So let me explain what that's about. Want to make one real important distinction, how I brought that content into Excel. There's a big difference between copying and pasting on top of a cell, which is what I did here, and copying and pasting inside the cell. So let me just show you. I'm going to actually undo this. First, let's just make sure that we see. Let me see. If we come into the format, I think, yeah, we just unlocked it. So let me just show you the difference between pasting on top and pasting inside. So if I come back here, select my content again, just copy to my clipboard. This time I'm going to paste inside the spreadsheet cell. And to do that, notice right now I've got like a little border around the cell that would paste on top. on the cell. If I want to paste inside the cell, I'm going to double click, get that cursor inside the cell. Another way to do this is to select the formula bar, does the very same thing. And now I'm going to do my Control V, paste that answer in. Now notice I have lost my formatting. That's because I've pasted inside the cell. It's going to take the formatting of the cell. But notice I can leave, I can come back now, and I can edit the value of the cell. It does not do the lock. So let's look at why this actually happens. I'm going to unprotect the sheet. And we're going to look at what it is about the formatting that would cause this to happen. So I'm going to look under cell styles. And here you're going to see a number of things. You may have never even bothered to look here, but there's some interesting stuff here in the formatting. And one thing I want to direct your attention to is a normal style. So Excel, you probably know the term normal and normal styles from Microsoft Word. So you know in Microsoft Word there's a thing called a normal template, and there's a thing called a normal style. A normal template is all the defaults that happen when you make a new document. You have a normal template, whether you want a normal template or not. If you delete it, it will remake itself. You can't really get away from it. The reason for this is that Microsoft Word needs a place to look up what your defaults are. Excel is the very same way. So you do have defaults that whenever you workbook or a new worksheet, and that's contained, like in Word, in the normal settings. And to look at what those normal settings are, I'm just going to do a right click here on normal and look at modify. This is just going to show me some things about the normal settings. So I do have some formatting here. I can do fonts and things like this, kind of standard style. But if you look here way to the bottom of this checklist, you'll see something called protection, and it's checked true, which means it's locked. And this means that whenever a new worksheet is created, all the cells will automatically be locked. That's the thing that's causing that formatted cell to lock itself. So here's what's going on in Excel. I copy paste on top of the cell. It brings in formatting, and by doing that, it invokes the default settings, this one in particular, onto the cell and actually applies the lock on it again. Again, Microsoft says this is not a bug. It really does sort of feel like a bug. It's definitely something to look out for. So that means, now what's the odds that your workbook has this checked? The odds are very, very good, because this is the way Excel will ship. This is considered to be a normal default. So unless you knew about this, or your RFP issuer knew about this, went into the normal style, came here and unchecked this, your workbooks are going to have this setting applied. So again, what we want to make sure we do, I'm going to protect this again, is that to avoid this problem, make sure that you're pasting inside the cell and not formatted text on top of the cell. Real important to remember that. Let me try another one. Okay, the next one I'm going to do is a bulleted list, which we know causes lots of problems. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste on top of the cell. Let's see what happens here. So you'll see it's a green kind of boundary there. I'm going to do a Control V. It looks very nice. I've got my bullets. That's all great. But notice what's happened. Hopefully you can see that. It's spilled over additional rows. This is another problem with pasting text from Word on top of a cell in Excel. Again, it's going to look nice, it's going to preserve your formatting, but the problem is it's going to spill over. And generally speaking, if you are responding to an Excel RFP, the issuer expects your answer to be contained within the answer cell. Not going to work for us. So let's just undo that. Okay, let's try that again. This time, I'm just going to copy it, make sure I have it. I'm going to copy it again. This time I'm going to actually paste it inside the cell. Again, I've got my cursor blinking there. Okay, let's have a look at this. Let me see, I just need to, what did I do there? Okay, there it is. I don't know why that didn't work. Let me just unformat that. I think I've got a auto height problem here. There we go. So we see that it's brought it in, it's kept it all within the same cell, but my bullets have been lost. And you see I've got these little question mark boxes instead of the round bullets. If you've ever done this and gotten some odd things happen with your bulleted list, you may see something like a square or some other odd kind of character. Basically what Excel is telling you right there is that this character is something it doesn't understand. So that's why it's giving you this odd character. So there's some things you can do here. You could manually, assuming that you're not protected against doing this, locked out against this, you could go to insert and replace the bullets manually. This is one way. Some people do that. It's not particularly a fun way to do that. But what we want to do is show you a trick to get your Word content Excel ready so that it will paste nicely into the cell. Let me just undo this because what we want to do is, that's not going to work. Let's delete it out. So I'm going to actually maximize Word because we want to look at the nature of bullets. So remember, when we are copying and pasting text inside of a cell, it's going to take the font of that cell. We're not going to be able to bring in the special formatting along with it. So what's happening there is this bullet is not being recognized properly by Excel, and it's looking at whatever it is, Arial or Calibri, whatever the font of the cell is, and it's looking at that font for that character, and that doesn't work out very well. But as it turns out, there are some bullets that are available in your standard fonts that will convey over to Excel properly. So I'm going to look at this by actually examining what my bullet structure is. And to do that, I'm just going to go to that multi-level list. That's the third button over on the top of Word. And I'm going to go to define new multi-level list. So I have a custom style here. We're real big believers in custom styles. This should apply even if you don't use style, so that we really recommend it. And what I want to do with my style is just look and see what kind of bullet I have there. So I've got a round bullet, don't know what that means exactly, but what I'm going to do is come down here, all the way down. It's a lot of steps here. I know I'm going really fast, but don't worry. Every step that I'm taking is in that PowerPoint, every screenshot, so not to worry. Do not have to worry about following along. Exactly. So I'm going to click on New Bullet. And here it brings up a list of bullets, and it shows me the bullet that I currently have. And it's a nice standard round bullet, nothing too special about that. But the thing you need to notice is that the font is Wingdings. If you use bullets and you've never gone in and changed the kind of bullets you use, chances are you're using some kind of Wingdings. It's really standard in Microsoft. Microsoft likes Wingdings so much. They've got Wingdings 1, they got Wingdings 2, they got Wingdings 3, they got WebDings. We have all kinds of these dings, and they have lots of fun things. Really common that this is used in bullets. But the problem is Wingdings is not the font of my Excel spreadsheet. Right? It's, I think, Arial or Calibri. And that character in Arial is nothing. It's not a character that's recognized. That's why we get a strange little question mark. But just happens to be that your standard fonts do have bullets available that you can use. So here's a really good trick of preserving bullets in Excel. So I'm going to come here, make sure you're on Unicode hex right down there. That's also, by the way, in the presentation, not to worry. And I'm going to look around. There's actually all kinds of things here. So we have all kinds of different areas of the font that you may not know about. So I'm going to go down a few. And I'm going to look at general punctuation. Here's one of them. And there's a bunch of stuff here that's kind of odd, but notice there's a bullet right there. Perfectly fine bullet. If that isn't good enough, though, and we want more variety, actually you can go down a little bit further and find geometric shapes. So check this out. I have all kinds of potential bullets here, all kinds of stuff I can choose from. So here's the trick. If you use a bullet character that's from your standard font or the font that's being used by Excel, and you use one of these characters, Excel will understand what that is. So let's go ahead and just change it up. Now you've noticed these are bigger. I just want to make sure it's clear that we're using something else. It doesn't have to be this big. You could use a different one if you wanted to. And now let's try it. I'm going to select this again. Let's kind of go back. Again, I'm going to go inside my cell, right? You see my cursor is blinking. Now let's paste it. And you see I have bullets. Now you're going to have to move it over probably a little bit if you want to get that indent. So why is this important? You know, there's so few things you can do in Excel. It's not easy to do formatting. There's usually lots of limits on what you're allowed to do in your Excel RFPs, but having the ability to do a list that's formatted, that's easy to read, just is a very helpful thing. And a lot of our users and customers really feel that this is an important thing to have work out well. So that's a good trick to get your bullets in there. I'm going to show you one more copy paste trick here. So I'm going to go here. I've got an image here. And we've been talking so far about the importance when you're pasting into, particularly into locked, protected sheets, but really any sheets that you do the paste inside the cell, not on top of the cell. Images are an exception to that rule. And let me explain why. In Word, you have lots of options on how images are placed in your document. Images can float around, but more likely they're going to be in line with your text or tight with the text. That means that it's stabilized in the document. The text is below it, ahead of it, to the side of it, but it's very well anchored in your document. It's called inline or tight in your text. In Excel, there is no such thing as inline images. All images float. Images don't really live or reside inside the cell. They're always on top of the cell. So you can't actually paste them in. So with images, you're going to have to paste on top. First, I'm going to get my content in. This is just my text. I'm going to do that the very same way. I'm going to go into Excel. I'm going to paste that in. All right. Now I want to bring the image over. Now, a couple ways to do that. You could enlarge the size of the row. If you have auto height settings on your Excel sheet, this may cause you problems because since the image is floating, it won't actually recognize it as spacing. So a good way to do that is just simply add some spacing in your cell to make sure that there's room for that image to reside. So I'm going to do some enters, and with Excel, to get an enter key, to get a line in a cell, you're going to use Alt Enter. So I'm holding down the Alt key, and I'm going to hit enter a few times. I don't know how many times I'm going to do that. Let's make sure we get that listed. So we see I've made some room. Okay, so it's ready for the image. Now I'm going to do a copy paste of the image, but I'm pasting on top. So the cursor is not inside. I'm going to paste on top, not inside. And there it is. Now notice it's floating, just floating around. I'm going to position it. I want it to look like it belongs in that cell so that it's part of that cell. The problem, of course, is that you may have found with inserting images in your Excel RFPs, assuming that they're not protected against images, which is always a possibility, is that as you add rows or change column size or do other things, your image, it may be floating around, your rows may be moving, and the cell doesn't stay, right? It doesn't stay with your cell. So here's a real important trick to make your cell, to make your image persist in the cell. So I'm just going to do a right click. Actually, let's maximize so we can see that. I'm going to do a right click right here on the image. I'm going to go to Size and Properties. There it is. It brings up my formatting pane. And the thing I want to direct your attention to is Properties right down here. Let's click on that and move this up. By default, I generally choose Move, but don't resize with the cells. And this means this is now going to live with this cell. I can add rows, delete rows, and as this cell itself moves up and down on my worksheet, the image is going to go up and down with the cell. So it's going to behave just like it were in line, even though it's not. So that's, you can also, I usually do not set it to automatically resize with the cells. You may want to do that, but sometimes that can cause some distortion. So for instance, if columns get smaller, it can be shrunk a bit. So I usually just set it to move, and then I'm going to take care of the resizing myself. So that's our trick on getting those images in there and making them stay where you want them to be. So Diane, I'm going to stop right here. I'm going to ask whether you want me to take some questions now, or should we move on to the next piece in Excel?
This has been, really great so far, and I think it would be perfect timing to go right into some of the more data validation inspector elements.
Okay, then let's go there. I'm going to go to another tab on the spreadsheet, and this is RFP with some restrictions. That's already set up. And you notice I've got here 5 questions. So my RFPs are getting more and more complicated. So slowly but surely. So I'm going to go over this particular sheet. We want to look at data validation. And data validation are those messages you get when you enter content in that restrict what you put into an answer cell. Very, very common in Excel RFPs. And the way we came up with some of our tools here is, as part of our working group, our working group members delighted in sending us the most horrific and ugliest Excel RFPs that they could find. And the problem we found that was the worst and most pervasive were data restrictions on very lengthy Excel RFPs, locked down protected sheets with data restrictions that varied from row to row to row, and sometimes the restrictions were described and sometimes they weren't, and sometimes they were described inaccurately. Really a lot of problems, really a lot of pain and suffering to do with this. So we really want to focus on how can we help you with that specific problem. So let's look at what it means to get what a data restriction is. So I have a question here. I'm gonna start by, I'm just gonna copy and paste some stuff. Let's just copy some content in and see what happens. So I'm gonna, again, I'm inside, this is a protected sheet. You can see I've got a lot of things grayed out up there. So I'm just gonna paste something in. Looks pretty good, no problem here. I click outside of the cell and notice what I get. I get an error message. The error message says, this value doesn't match the data validation restrictions defined for this cell. Okay, well, what does it not tell me, this message? It does not tell me what are the data validation restrictions defined for this cell. I have no idea. So let me just cancel out of there. It goes away. Well, let's try something else. Let me do 2, 3. Is that going to work? No, it still is not. It still does not match the restrictions. And again, I have no idea what the restrictions are. Really, really frustrating. So how do these restrictions get applied to cells? We're going to have to go back and unprotect the sheet. Again, let's unprotect it so we can see what this is. So we want to look at the data validation. So the only way to see the data validation, of course, is if we've unprotected the sheet. If it's protected, I have no access to see what the data validation is. So data validation is under the data tab, under this drop-down called data validation. I'm going to look at this data validation right now. You see this. The very first cell has data validation of character length. It's at least 5 characters and no more than 30 characters. So that's the data validation there. The next one is a drop-down list. How do we do that? Again, that's data validation. So I can see this, it's a list. Here is where my list is. So you've probably used or seen data validation in the past. This is how it works. You can have all types of, you can have character limits, which is one of the most common data validations in RFPs. You can have lists, you can have data types, sometimes it's whole numbers, things like that. All these things are possible as data validation. The only way that you can find out what the data validation is that's applied to a cell, unless the issuer is kind enough to tell you, is to go to data and look it up under data validation. Now, of course, if it's protected, let's do that again. Protect the sheet. We don't know. So this is protected, assuming that it's password protected, as they often are. I don't know what kind of protection has been applied to the worksheet. I do not know what the data validation is on the cells. I can go to data, but notice, of course, all of this is grayed out. I have no access to understand any of this information. So what we found in trying to solve this problem for our customers and users that were really beleaguered by this is what I discovered is that even though as a user looking at a protected worksheet, I cannot diagnose or inspect what that validation rule is on a cell, programmatically behind the scenes I can. This does not require breaking any passwords or doing anything like that. Nothing like that is done. The spreadsheet's not affected in any way, but I can actually examine it programmatically. And that is how it came about developing this tool. I'm going to click over. By the way, you can see it's just another tab on Excel. All of our products are delivered as ribbon tabs on top of Office products. This particular one is in Excel, and you can see we have buttons here. It's just like other tabs. These 3 in the middle have to do with the inspection. The other ones have to do with us, and you can come find about us and visit our blog, which has got a lot of cool stuff on Excel and other things. but these are the three I want to look at. So there's 3 levels of inspecting a worksheet. One is the cell level. So let's start with that. I'm going to start here on the left. I'm going to look at the left. I'm going to inspect the cell. I'm going to click the button, and it actually tells me exactly what's going on. It says it's unlocked, and it is a text field, and the character limit is between 5 and 30, which is what we saw in the data validation. I can come down. I can work myself all the way through. Here's a list. It tells me. Sorry.
Real quick, that worked even though you have the protection on, right? So we don't have access to that information in the data validation area, but we can see it because of that button, right?
That's correct. So I'm programmatically behind the scenes using this button, able to read what the cell data validation is programmatically. The only way to do this, if data validation is not available, is through code. That's the only way that I found. So that's correct. So you need a tool like this. I don't know that there's any other tools that do this, but you'll need a tool like this to be able to inspect that cell. Thank you for clarifying that. So that's the first level. And I can go my merry way all the way through as I'm doing this, so I don't have to guess what the limit is. I know what it is, so that's 50. So I know I've got to bring in an answer that is no more than 50 characters. So the next level of worksheet inspection is actually the things that are applied, those checkboxes that are applied when I protect the sheet. Remember, you can allow images or not, you can allow formatting or not. There's a lot of things on those checkboxes. Again, something I can't figure out. If it's password protected, I can't unprotect it in order to see what was set. So that's the next level. I'm going to click inspect the worksheet. This is telling me that next level up on the protection, it says it is protected, and these following restrictions apply to the worksheet as a whole. The first one is, and I've got it in caps because we are so concerned that people will stumble on this problem, is that there is a setting that will reset a cell to locked if you paste formatted text. And there's an asterisk, and you can even go to the blog article, which we have online, to explain actually what I just previously explained to you about the self-locking cells. Really, a really important thing to be aware of. So it tells you that. This is the first thing we tell you because we want to make sure nobody stumbles on that unawares. And then we tell you direct formatting isn't permitted. You can't do images. They're not permitted. And this particular worksheet has cells with their 4 cells that contain data restrictions. So it gives you a next level up of what you're getting into before you start trying to answer it. So there's no need to try to bring in an image. It's not going to let it come in. So the third level of inspection is the workbook itself. And this is what we find is the most useful for the people who have been using this tool. And this tool has been out, and I want to say it's been out for about a year, maybe a little bit longer than a year to our working group. And it's been very well received and really useful to them, which is the other reason that we decided to make this widely available with no charge, because they found that it was really important. So this last one is actually going to create a report. It's going to take the workbook that you have. It's protected, it's locked. It's not going to do anything to alter your original workbook, which we never want to do that, because obviously if the RFP issuer has delivered something to you, you have to be very careful that nothing has been tampered with that may make the RFP, your response is ultimately non-compliant. So we don't ever touch your original RFP, but it makes a duplicate, a copy of it. The copy that it makes will be unprotected. It will be as faithful as possible, depending on what the workbook will allow it to read about it. And it will give you all the information about the worksheet restrictions, and the cell restrictions on every cell. So let's have a look at this. So I'm going to click inspect the workbook. Got a couple options. I can do everything. In my case, I'm just going to do the ones that have restrictions, and the reason for that is sometimes workbooks come and they have instructions and a lot of background information, and you don't necessarily need a report that contains it all. You can certainly have it all if you want, but we just want to get right to the kind of the meat of it. So we're going to run this report. Also, don't worry, there will be documentation with this tool. No need to worry about that. And it's finished. It's really quick because my RFP was pretty short. And you see it's going to give you, in this case, it gives me one tab is the summary. It tells me where it's from, the date, a little information about how to use this report. And then it's going to give me a tab for each of the tabs that had data restrictions. And in this case, I had 2. The one we're going to look at actually is the second one. It's this one. So we're going to see two things on this report. It looks a lot like the spreadsheet I just showed you. Here's one difference to see right away. I've got this comment. This is just a comment, pops up right away for me. It tells me the worksheet restrictions that are on that worksheet. Again, this was this button right here in the report. It delivers it as a comment. It defaults it up and out so you can absolutely see it, but then you just can close it. You can either close the comment or you can come up here. I've got a little button here, just close it out. It's just a comment. You can bring it up whenever you want. Make sure that you know what the worksheet level restrictions are. So for instance, if you shared this with an SME, you'd want them to know that there's no images are going to be permitted in the RFP and things like that. So let's just close that out. The next thing you're going to notice is where there were unlocked answer cells. These cells are marked in yellow. This indicates that these are unlocked and the rest of them are locked. These are the cells that you're expected to put an answer in. You also notice that instead of being blank and containing data validation, the data validation is actually described to you in text right in the cell. So that was the first one. That was the list. That was the character limit 50. So we have users who the first thing they do when they get an RFP in is they run this report immediately. And this is the report that they use. A couple ways that we've found that our users use this report. Some people will use this report as a reference. So especially if you're sharing parts of your RFP to be done by SMEs or other folks in your organization, you want them to have this. This is the instructions. Some people will actually send this out, say, put your answer in the row next to it. So for instance, you could send it to someone, say you've got, the first 10 questions I want you to answer. Here are the instructions on how to do it. And will you please put your answer next to it? And then I'm going to use that to bring it back into my workbook later. Another way you might do it is just, again, as a reference as you're going through your RFP. You could print this or have this available on another monitor so you know exactly what you need to do before you have to get to the cell. So a couple ways to do this. We find this has been very well received and really useful to folks.
Definitely, definitely. And maybe even a third way, because I can tell a little story on this while we get ready to take a couple questions and move on to the other part of our demo too. But a third way, I have a customer who actually ran this just the way Melissa described, several hundred lines of questions. And keep in mind, this is a little, tattletaling, but there's, most of your RFP issuers are not out to get us, contrary to popular belief. They make errors too, through copy paste, through drag and drop. It's Excel, easy enough to do. And after running it, realized that almost to the letter, all of the cells had the exact same character limitation, which is pretty common. They want sort of same size answers. Only that character limitation was 4 characters. Not going to give you a lot of room to give a response to a question that says describe something. So she was actually able to send that information back to the issuer, who realized the error that it should have been 400 characters and not 4, and was able to make the correction, get it back out to everybody later on. And as you can imagine, not only did that sort of help speed along the process for our client responding to their RFP, it really made them look pretty good in the eyes of their prospect as they were getting started to do that response. So kind of a silly story about things that can happen, and I'm sure you all have plenty more that you could share in that same vein. So Melissa, I think we have time for a couple questions. If you want to do that, remind everybody that this has been the RFP Inspector tool. This is the one that we'll be sending out the information on later that you can download for free for having attended today's webinar. We're going to take a couple questions now, and then we have a little more that we can show you in Excel as well. It's different than this product, but a little more for those of you that continue to have other needs within Excel and Microsoft Word. So let's see, I'm looking here. Oh, here's a perfect one. I think we have some budding hackers, but I will say that almost to the letter, whenever we show this tool to people, we get this question, which is, okay, this is great, but can I just undo the protection on the sheet? How do I undo the protection on the sheet?
Yeah, we always get that. Okay, so that's a good question. I have a couple answers to that. So chances are, obviously you're only asking that because the protection is password protected. So that means that the person who issued it and sent it to you doesn't want you to unprotect it. Something to keep in mind, because if they say don't unprotect it, if you do so, you always run the risk of possibly being non-compliant when you send your RFP back. There are websites that advertise that they can give you a code that will hack and undo a password. Something to keep in mind, two things to keep in mind. First of all, I really don't recommend ever going to any website that offers code to hack a password, because chances are when you go to that website, you're probably getting hacked yourself. So beware, don't do that. The other thing is, even if you do break the password's gone. It's not like it doesn't ever, any of these methods that people use to hack Excel passwords don't tell you what the password is. It just undoes the password. And so when you send it back, it will be very clear to the issuer that you've hacked the password. So just keep that in mind. It's kind of a dangerous thing to do, and I wouldn't recommend it. However, if you feel like you have to do that, or some other reason that you need to get a spreadsheet that you've lost the password to, one method that is fairly reliable that people use is to save it as a Google spreadsheet. That is, if you have a Google account, you can actually upload it and have the Google site convert it to a spreadsheet, then download it and convert it back to an Excel spreadsheet. And that generally will give you a workbook that is no longer protected. However, you may lose, there may be some loss. It may not be perfectly exact, so keep that in mind. That, it's not 100% reliable, but that's a method. But again, I would not recommend unprotecting or doing anything like that with an RFP if you've not been given permission. So I would say, if you use a tool like this, you'll be able to see what you're getting into. If you're careful about that pasting in instead of on, you should be okay. So we're hopefully this kind of tool will eliminate the need to hack the password.
And you've been fairly warned. Very nice.
Been fairly warned. Yeah.
That's good. Okay, let's see. Here's one more. How do you install it? I think it being the inspector tool itself. What's the installation like? We have instructions for that too, that will go out, correct?
We do, absolutely, we do, and that's a good question. So, what you're seeing here, it's an add-in for Excel. It's an Excel XLAM file. You'll download it from, well, you'll get it probably in an email. You want to put it someplace locally, and basically you're going to double click on it and it's going to install itself. It's really pretty much that simple. If you wanted it to always open up, you would save it in the startup folder. That would do it. And you're basically double clicking on it. The thing that may go wrong, actually the problem you may have in installing it has to do with levels of security, pardon me, on Excel or on Windows. And so whenever you get any kind of file, especially one that contains code, because obviously there's code on this add-in, and you downloaded this from an email, keep in mind that there may be some protections that are imposed on that. So sometimes the file itself will be blocked. You'll have to go in and unblock it. Sometimes Excel will open up a message and say, do you want to run these macros? Where you say, yes, I do. If you open this up and this ribbon does not appear, you don't see a tab that appears as it says RFP Inspector, then it's probably been blocked by one of these levels, either a Windows protection or an Excel protection. And we have in the instructions you'll get with the inspector all the various ways that we've seen that could possibly affect this. Usually very easy to take care of. Just look at the steps. You may need to go into Excel options to enable it. You may need to go to the file itself and unblock it. So nothing difficult to do, but keep in mind if it doesn't appear, it's probably because it's been blocked by either Windows or Excel.
Perfect. Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to, just in the interest of time, I'm going to hold on questions. Remember from the beginning, I promised you we will get back to you if we did not hit your specific question. We will still do a follow-up on that. And that also means all is not lost if you're still typing a question or still have more that you want to get in. Remember, you're looking for the Q&A button, probably in the upper left-hand screen if you hover over what you're seeing in the Zoom interface. And you're welcome to type that in, and we will still take the questions up until the point that we end the webinar itself, and then we'll go ahead and respond back. But in the interest of time, I'm going to hold on the questions at this stage, and we're going to switch gears one last time and switch over, still playing in Excel, leaving the inspector tool, but building off of a lot of the things that we've been talking about so far, all of the various and sundry challenges that we continue to have in Excel, and look at a different Excel product that we have. This is not one that we're giving for free today, but certainly one that you can talk to us about purchasing. And I hope that it's one that you find to be just as enjoyable. So Melissa, I'll switch it back over to you.
Okay, I'm going to close out this report, and I'm going to come to a third tab here, and this is, my RFPs are getting longer each time I do a demo. So this is another example. It's just an Excel RFP, and it's, let's just switch out of here. It is protected. We're going to have some questions. So what I want to show you now is actually the product that did come out of the working group. So you're going to see some of the same things we've shown you actually be incorporated into this product. And the objective of the working group of this product was a product that would let people respond to Excel RFPs using Word and then bring them back into Excel. So let me just show you how that works. I'm going to switch over to another Word document. Okay, so I have in here, this is, let's just move over here. So what I have here is part of that worksheet of that Excel RFP. I've copied and pasted that into a Word document. That's all I've done. So why would somebody want to do this? So there's a number of reasons why you would want to actually take your Excel RFP out of Excel and put it in Word and use Word to answer it. And what are some of the reasons? Well, one of the reasons, of course, for our customers was that it enables them to use the tools or content tools and automation tools that we provide in Word to do an Excel RFP and get it back into Excel. Some of these tools just are not available in Excel. So that's one reason, and we'll look at that in a second. Other reasons that we've heard from our users is there's functionality that's available in Word, simply not available in Excel. Spell check, for instance, although it's available in Excel, may be limited or may not work if a sheet's protected. That's a bit of a problem. Spell check is obviously real important. One of the major features of Word that we hear from our users is track changes. So the ability to work with the subject matter experts. A lot of folks would prefer to share it, to bring it to Word, to provide it to their SMEs in Word with all the track changes and other things deployed, and to work with the answers and stuff and creating the answers in Word. So a number of reasons. So what I want to do, I mean, there's some challenges, of course, if you've done it in Word. One is, how do you get it back into Excel without having to copy and paste every single answer, which is annoying. And then other things, how do you take care of that data validation? We're going to look at that, how we've actually incorporated the inspector into this tool, and how you take care of some of those formatting challenges. We've looked at bullets, we've looked at images. How can you do that without having to go through all those steps manually? And so that's what this tool is going to be able to provide. The first thing I want to do is kind of finish this up. So I've already brought this in. I've already done some answers, so you can see I've got one with an image, because we definitely know that that's tricky to do. I'm going to bring in a few more answers into this table. So to do that, I'm using another tool of ours. This is our content tool. We have a number of tools. We're just going to look at a couple today. This one resides right on top of Microsoft Word, like the inspector. It's just a ribbon in Word. You can see here's it's just going to load it up as another ribbon in Word. This tool actually contains content that's been pre-formatted, that contains various automation tools that speed the process along. And so there's a few ways we can bring this content in. The content's displayed as galleries across the top. It's what we call these galleries. You can have a look at these galleries. You can look at some thumbnails. This is the bits of content that are stored here. You see, these are bits of Word content, contain everything that Word can contain. A few different ways I can bring something in. I know we're going really fast, but if any of this looks interesting, we're really happy to meet with you another time and go over this in more detail. I'm going to search the content library or content portfolio. It's going to give me a list of answers organized by validity there. I'm just going to pop one in. I've just put my cursor in the table. I'm just going to get one in there. That's a nice one. You notice I've got these little yellow things. These are placeholders or content controls, something that's really useful in automating content the way that we do, but it's not something that is supported by Excel. So if you're doing this in Word first, you can actually use all these features in Word. So I'm going to tailor this as agency name. I'm just going to change this to, let's do State of Ohio. This is my government content. Do that. You notice any place else agency appears, it's going to swap it out. And then I'm going to pick something from a drop-down. I love drop-downs. This is my favorite thing. Whenever I can get a drop-down. So who wants to type? So all those automation tools are available in Word. Although the automation content controls don't exist in Excel, the result of the automation will go into Excel just fine. Let me drop something else up. Let's drop this in. There we go. That's a bulleted list. We know that that's tricky. And these are actually custom bullets. These are going to cause some problems. So what I want to do here is I want to get this content into Excel. So I'm going to switch over to the other product that we want to show you, which is the Excel Connect product. And we call it Excel Connect because I'm working in Word, but I'm connecting to Excel. And that's what I'm doing here. So there's a lot of features here. We're going to look at just a few really fast because we're getting kind of close on time. First, I want to show you right off the bat that some of those buttons that you saw in the inspector reside right here also in Excel Connect. So I can do a click, I can get information. You already saw this in the inspector. Tells me from here what the restrictions are on top of that spreadsheet. I can also get the restrictions for the corresponding cell by clicking current cell restrictions. And here it's asking me, you know what, you're going to have to map it. I want to show you this real quick. So the only configuration you have to do to connect your Word table to the Excel spreadsheet is just tell it which columns match which columns. In this case, it's going to ask you which of the question columns in Word and Excel and which are the answer columns. In this case, we only have one answer column, but often not uncommon that you would have multiple columns in which you have to answer. We're just doing 2B. No, I do not have to match the rows because the tool itself is going to search the question now that it knows where to look for it, and it's going to find the match, and that's how it's going to take care of that. I'm going to save those settings. And now it's going to give me information about that cell. It tells me, and if you remember, I think we looked at this, maybe we looked at this, it's a character limit of 500, and the current count is 506. So not only tells me what the character count should be, it tells me what I've done. So I'm over it by 6 characters. Okay, well, that isn't too hard to fix, but just for the heck of it, what happens if I try to export it without fixing it? And I want to show you that. A couple ways I can export. I'm just going to do a single cell. We're going to do the rest of the table here in a minute. I'm going to export just a single cell, and to do that, I can come up here to this button on the top, or I can right-click. I got it on a menu. I'm going to export it, just a single cell. And it's turned red. That should give you indication something went wrong, and it tells me in the comment field exactly what happened. So it's not going to fail silently. It's going to tell me immediately. It's going to tell me that there is a character limit, that it broke. This is the current character count. So I can right here, before I proceed, let me just fix that because I know state of Ohio. I could just go with Ohio. Let's see this. Go to Ohio. Click it out. Notice it's changed in both places. Let's try it again. Let me export it now. It's turned green, and that should give us a clue. If I go over to Excel, it's put it in the right place, in the right cell, and there it is. So I think do we have time? Let's try to do a few more. We're going very fast here, but what I want to do, let's do them all, because obviously you don't want to do them one at a time. We want to just really get going on this. So I'm going to do all of them. I've already set some formatting options. Now the bullets, I've actually set some formatting options to let Excel Connect know how I want those bullets converted. Remember, it's going to have to convert them to be Excel-friendly bullets before Excel will like them. So I've selected these. I'm going to export multiple cells, right? It's just going to confirm that's what I want to do. That is what I want to do. Let's see if it works. It's exporting row by row. There's not too many of them. There it goes. You see what's happened, it's changed, it's converted my bullets. Those are Excel-friendly bullets now. It has given me a warning on this one because there was an error here. So I could go through this table, take care of the errors here. In this case, it's a list. I love this because I can actually select the right answer and stick it in. Is that right? Do it again. I'm just going to export that single cell. Let's see if it goes green. It did go green. Everything's green. I switch over to Excel. What I need to do here is I just need to do the auto height. There's my bulleted list. Oh, let's do the auto height here. And you see what it did for my image. It's already put in all the spaces it needed to put in, and it's adjusted it and put it in pretty much the right place. Boy, we went really fast. So
Oh,
that's,
that is so satisfying, though, to see that all pop in there and move back and forth. So thank you, Melissa. I can't thank you enough for having shared all of that with us. I know that was a lot to throw at everybody, but I hope you found that interesting. I hope it speaks to what you go through all of the time. And so just closing remarks wise, big thank you to all of you who came today. I know that we all share some of these same challenges, so hopefully you were able to find something that was of interest to you, and to Melissa for giving us this presentation. And as one more reminder, we touched on this at the beginning of the webinar as well. The RFP inspector is available upon request. Simply visit expediencesoftware.com and click on the free tools button in the top navigation bar to receive your copy today. And unless anybody in my panel has anything else to add, I'll bid everybody to have a wonderful day.
thank you.
Bye, everybody.